Oh, do you know what I didn't do? I was going to change my name to the
Oh,
shipyard.
I forgot as well. I forgot. Oh, right. I mean,
Right,
you know.
let's do it all again. Two. Right.
Hi, and welcome back to the Shipyard. This is episode 4. I'm Dawn, and this is Lucy. Hopefully you've seen one of our videos before. If not, we're welcome. We are here to talk about TV shows, will they, won't these, slow burns, the classic tropes, and the best shows and the worst examples of when it all goes horribly wrong. We previously talking about specific shows, Moonlighting and Who's the Boss and The Upper Hand, and last month we talked about Car Share. This month we're talking about more general topic, and we're calling it The Lady and the Tramp. Not the film, not the Disney classic film, but the genre of, and there's a lot of them actually, TV shows which feature the classy upper class lady and the downtown guy. You could also, I think, on TV tropes they actually call it Uptown Girl as a TV trope, obviously from the Billy Joel song. And it has very specific tropes within that trope that go through them all, and it's probably one of the most common in Britain because of Britain has, if you don't know, we have a major class system in Britain, and so it's a big topic in Britain, but it also is in America. Obviously The Lady and the Tramp itself is an American film, an American concept. So what TV shows immediately spring to your mind when we say Lady and the Tramp?
Well, the first one just sprung to my mind then was just when you mentioned Billy Joel, Uptown Girl, because Ashes to Ashes actually did a pastiche of the video of that in one of their episodes. And like the premise of that is it's those that haven't seen it, it's the sequel series to Life on Mars. And it's where Drake gets shot in the present day, and she wakes up back in 1981, and she ends up in Fenchurch East working with Gene Hunt, who's quite a very different character. He's a good guy, but he's very brash, he's very man about town, and she's very upper class, so he nicknames her Bolly. And I think that's one of the ones that really, there's a lot that springs to mind. I mean, obviously the earlier examples of that would be Cheers with Diane and Sam, because she was completely the opposite of him. She was educated, well-to-do, and he was an ex-baseball player that ran a bar. But yeah, they seem to work. I think it's the clashes, I think, that creates the tension.
Yeah, it's a classic opposites attract. That's the entire basis of it, opposites attract. The origins of it, I mean, it's something as a concept that probably goes back as far as time immemorial, because, you know, even if you think about fairy tales and things, Aladdin is basically that concept. She's the princess, he's just a street boy. And
Cinderella is the reverse of that.
Yeah, exactly. Cinderella is the gender reverse. I think it's obviously a big concept in society that you want to raise up from your lower standing, but there's also a kind of a cross class thing where you want to see the upper class brought down to your level, kind of thing, but in a good way, in the sense of to show, look, they're just like everybody else. They have the same problems and issues within themselves. And that's for, Aladdin basically sums it up, and that the princess is bored of her life in the castle and wants excitement and something to be in amongst the normal people, and Aladdin's able to show her that whole new world.
Yeah,
So
I think a lot of them, they've got the class divide, but like you say, they're not that different, and they do actually, the way they work is they do actually end up having more in common than they initially thought. Obviously, the class divide is a huge issue to begin with, but and then because you've got the hot posh woman, like in Dempsey Makepeace, you've got literally is a lady, and you've got the brash, like James Dempsey comes over from the Bronx, and he's quite sexist at first, and then she makes him realize that a woman can be a good cop, and they actually, by the end of the series, they can't work without each other. So a lot of these male female clashes, they bring out the best in the other person. So sometimes they educate each other in a way.
Yeah, that's totally that is totally the basis of it, isn't it? That they both bring out something from each other that has been missing in their previous life. Like the guy becomes, generally speaking, the guy is usually meant to be a bit irresponsible, a bit freewheeling, and a bit just out for a good time and nothing else. And so the female upper class person tends to sort of make him more responsible and more I don't know what the word is, respectable.
When you've got the class divide, you can say, oh yeah, that they're not criminals, they're not that far removed, they're just the class difference where they come from a different background. They go drinking, they go to play casino, they go play darts, snooker, whatever. Like in the upper hand, I mean, I think actually the upper hand was quite a good example, because Charlie thinks he's teaching Caroline to play poker, and then she just wipes the floor with all of them. So that's where it kind of backfires a little bit. But again, the upper hand's another really good example, because you've got, and like, who's the boss? You've got Caroline / Angela living in the posh areas of like London or Henley or Connecticut. So they are well to do. They've got the money, they've got the income, whereas you've got then the Charlie and Tony characters, they've come from the lower class areas of London and New York, and they want to better themselves. So even though they've got the lower class, they've got that ambition to try and move up. They want to get the best for their child. So that is their initial aim, to try and improve that. So they move them to that area. And then again, that's where the clashes come together. You've got the male housekeeper, but you've also got that gender divide, not only the gender divide, but the class divide as well. Because I think that is transparent when they go back to Tony's, where Tony grew up, and Angela Caroline goes to the bar and she sees the class difference and is kind of shocked by it at first.
Yeah,
but
I think that's the there is a difference in the American ones and the British ones because of Britain's serious issue with class, in that in America it tends mostly to be about money. It's about, have you brought up with money? Do you have a lot of money? And a lot of the issues Tony suffers when thinking about getting together with Angela is money based. It's about there's a painting that he buys for her and he can't afford it, and things like that is more financial based. Whereas in the British ones, although that is an issue, it's much more about breeding and how you're seen, your family lineage, and that is another sort of level that stops them getting together. And that's one thing I was going to say, is that the trope as a whole has the built-in MacGuffin of, this is why they don't get together immediately.
Yeah. Well, this is, I mean, like in Who's the Boss? I think it was the beginning of season 7, episode 1 of season 7. There's the episode In Search of Tony, and they go on holiday, and then Angela's having fun with somebody else, and then they realize that they could be together at the end. But then Tony's like, well, hold on a minute, how will that work? I work for you. What happens if when we get together, I mean, do I carry on working for you? So he wants to establish himself independent of Angela, because he doesn't want to be somebody that stays at home and she supports. Whereas in the upper hand, it goes the other way. They do get married, and Charlie's perfectly happy to stay at home, raise a family with Caroline and be the stay-at-home dad, housewife, house husband. Whereas in Who's the Boss, Tony wanted that career because he wanted to be on an equal footing with Angela.
Yeah.
I think also in terms of The Upper Hand and Who's the Boss, when that episode aired, it was 1990, 91.
Yeah.
Whereas by the time it aired in the UK, it was 95, 96. And even though it's only like a 4 or 5 year gap, attitudes have changed so much, even in that short time frame, that it isn't so much a big deal. Because if you think when Who's the Boss started, it was what, 1984? A stay-at-home dad and an independent career woman with that level of success wasn't a common thing. Now it's not unheard of. But if you think 30 years ago, 35 years ago, it was quite which is I think why it worked as a sitcom, because they spun it on its head, because it wasn't the norm. Yeah. And that's why it worked initially. But then obviously with the process of time and everything and attitudes changing, I don't know if that would work as well if it started now.
Yeah, that you've made an excellent point, because I've written a list of TV shows that I thought of when we thought of this, and not one of them is recent. They're all from the 80s, early 90s. I think it's becoming an issue that is a non-issue now, or certainly much lesser, that somebody from a lower class or poor ends up with somebody richer, or, that it definitely is something which has gone away a lot, but was a big issue in the 80s.
And even if you do make them now, they're generally historical, because Ashes to Ashes, I mean, I think that's 10 years old now, but that was made 10 years ago, but it was set in 1981, 82. Downton Abbey, that was made 10, 15 years ago, but that was sent, that started, I think the first episode was the day after the Titanic, so that started in 1912. So it's anything that's recent is generally historical. So I think we're in 2021, so attitudes are so different. Even like the other day when we were talking about the sitcoms and the will they won't theys, most of the will they won't theys now, and you have this male female scenario in the setup, they generally don't start till the late 70s, early 80s, because before that the attitudes were so different between sex and marriage and relationships, that anything that was made focused on in a family setting or a workplace setup. It wasn't so much the romantic side of it. So I think the 80s was key in changing all those aspects, and actually, which is why you've got so many will they won't theys in the class ones from that era. I mean, because in the 80s you've got Moonlighting, like with Maddie and David, you've got Sam and Diane in Cheers, and even Ashes to Ashes, again, that's set in the 80s. The 80s was quite key in having these examples.
Yeah, I think you've hit on exactly it. I think the 80s were a decade, and obviously slightly around either side, of great change in terms of society. Oh wow, this is hello, are we giving a lecture on on society? But you know what I mean, it was
on culture.
Cultural lecture, but it was a huge shift for feminism and for money and class, because it was all about the yuppies. It was about getting, and certainly in the UK, Mrs. Thatcher saying, we're selling off all the housing and the public things, and you can become rich if you buy into British Rail or the post office or whatever it was. And so I think that's probably why there were so many of these shows, because it was emulating what a society was dealing with, was this clash of the old and the new, and them coming together.
I think again you've talking about Thatcher and setting things off. I think a really good example of that is Just Good Friends. You've got Penny, who's proper old school rich. You've got the dad that's the bank manager, the posh mother, and then you've got Vince, who's nouveau rich. They've got the really what Penny's mother would be common, and they're Essex based, they're brash, but they're rich and they're just as wealthy and well-to-do. In fact, at the end of it, Vince's dad employs Penny's dad to work for him, and those role reversals are changed. So class is not always necessarily about money, it's how people see each other. And they say, well, you come from that background, so you can't be the same class as us because you come from somewhere different. So the money does raise that level, but it's also identity and how you're perceived by somebody else.
Yeah, and that's a good point about that one of the shows that came to my mind when we were speaking about this was On the Up, which was a early 90s sitcom starring Dennis Waterman, and it kind of deals in the after Happy Ever After kind of thing. It is the story of somebody like Vince from Just Good Friends, who is a commoner. He's a barra boy type who has made a lot of money, and he marries a posh woman, and so this On the Up starts after they've got divorced, because even though he was rich, he wasn't bred, the same way she was, and so he didn't fit in with her life, and she didn't fit in with his. And in the end, we see he has this rich life, but he surrounded himself by his old friends, because he employs his old friends, because he doesn't know how to make friends in it. So there was still that classism, that he wasn't seen as good as other people because he was nouveau riche.
I think it's the same in I recently watched the very first episode of To the Manor Born. I don't actually remember that much about it because it was quite a long time ago when it was on, but it's again when Penelope Keith's character finds out, they're worried that whoever moves in or takes over from the manor house is going to be foreign, and there's a real kind of, it's dated now, but it wasn't frowned upon back then, but there's a bit of a racist attitude in a way. Mm-hmm. And then she finds out that Peter Bowles' character comes from a European background, and it's like, I thought you were British, but they changed their names when they came over to England. And that's a different kind of class divide, isn't it, where you have, you're not British, you're not upper class, you're not the lord of the manor, you shouldn't be buying this kind of. So there's different kinds of class and different kinds of stigma, I guess, in a way, against people's background.
To the Manor Born is a perfect example of that, because he's a hugely successful and obviously multi-millionaire, but because he's not British heritage, he's seen as lesser. And it's interesting because in most of these shows, the lower class guy is the one who's seen to change, because he becomes more responsible and things, and the woman does change as well, but only to a degree. But into the Manor Born, it's Audrey, I had to think what her name was there, Audrey, who completely changes her perception, and she realizes this guy is awesome, and even if he doesn't understand all the ins and outs of the local parish council and all that stuff, he wants to preserve the traditions as much as she does, just because he's come in. And it's her that completely realizes she was outdated and being prejudiced and whatever, which is not something that happens in a lot of them. Because, for instance, Diane, I don't think Diane changes her views, does she, in Cheers? She doesn't suddenly become less of a snob.
Well, she leaves in the end, doesn't she? So there is no happy ever after in Cheers. I mean, they tried, they had the wedding, they set the wedding date and everything, but that was one that kind of, that ship did sail, and not in a happy ever after sense. But I think it goes, it's like what you said about how I think in a lot of them, the men often the men change and the women become accepting.
Yeah.
And it's never, I mean, it's like in 3 Up, 2 Down. Mm-hmm. I think it feels like in a way that Michael Elphick just drove her into submission. It was kind of like, oh, whatever, I'll just give up now kind of thing. And but then it doesn't always work out that way, because I think you were telling me about Lovejoy.
Yeah.
When Phyllis Logan's character,
Lady Jane, she divorces from her husband, and she's still lady of the manor, and Lovejoy's still Lovejoy. But her husband comes back, and he's lost all the money of the family money, so they're going to have to sell the big house. And Lovejoy says to her, he sort of makes an assumption that she's going to move in with him, and she's like, don't be ridiculous. I can't move in with you. I'm the lady of the manor. How on earth are we going to do that? Am I going to live in some little grotty, garage come, whatever he is at that time doing his antiques or whatever? She can't live that life. So in the end, she leaves and goes to America, even though they both love each other and they both would make each other happy. Their lives are so completely different that Lady Jane just can't see it working in the long term, which is really sad. It is sad. It's still sad when I think about it.
I think, again, it's like ones where they don't work out. Like Moonlighting's a prime example. Maddie and David, the chemistry was, even from the very first episode, the chemistry was off the chart. She's like a famous model. She was rich, but she ends up back on his level, even though she manages Blue Moon. She's kind of a little bit more level with him now because she's lost all that money. She's brought down a few pegs. He used to be a bartender. He's a man about town. But yes, they get together, but it did, after they did sleep together, we've discussed this in the first episode. We know all about the Moonlighting curse. But again, one thing we did touch on is that these two characters are so different that, yes, we want to see them get together, but if it were real, could we see them? They would be divorced in 5 years.
Yeah.
These two characters are so different that you think, yes, there's the chemistry. Yes, they would be lustful, it would be passionate, but it's not a happy ever after. It's a case we want to see them together at the end. We don't want to see everything up, but do they always work?
I think that it's an interesting thing because it kind of divides the will they won't they's into, I mean, there's obviously more than two, but there is sort of two main categories, which is the best friends to lovers, you know, like your Miranda type thing, and then there's the opposites attract, and that is what you said is exactly the essence of them. It's all about their chemistry and not necessarily about are they compatible as two people. Do they, because as we've always said in Moonlighting, sometimes it seems that neither of them really like each other. They may love each other, but do they like each other? And I think that is the principle of a lot of the Lady and the Tramp type situations, is where there is still that level of disrespect for each other because of who they are. I mean, like the episode of Moonlighting, I can't remember if is it Symphony and Knocked Flat? No, that's the one with the boxing, isn't it?
Yeah, where they go on the date. It's like, I'll show you fine, I'll show you fun.
Yeah. It's a classic that's in that trope all the time of the posh, either the lower man goes to sort of the opera or whatever, and the higher class lady goes to the bar or to darts or whatever, as you say, and they don't fit in and they don't understand the rules of that society at all, and they don't, you know, and so they not feel badly, but they judge the other person for not knowing that, and so that you do feel like, no, if you really love someone, you'd be like, look, this is the person I'm with, or even if it's this is my friend, and how dare you judge them because of, you know.
Another perfect example of that in Moonlighting was My Fair David. Maddie wanted to change Maddie, because I think they were limboing, doing like Chubby Checker in the office, doing limbo rock, and Maddie comes in and saying, look, I need you to act like an adult for 2 weeks, and like, no more singing, no more doo-wopping. And it's like, well, there's episodes like that where you think, actually, you're not really that nice a person, you know. He's doing his best, and also he got the job. Well, he didn't get the job done because he was a bit of a slacker, but the thing is, it's that kind of, I mean, they were constantly trying to change each other, and if you, I mean, but you don't see that, like say in Dempsey Makepeace.
Yeah,
again, it's a similar setup, but it got them out feeling like, yes, they started off, she didn't want to work with him at all, and she only told Spikings that she'd work with him and she had an 8-week holiday at the end of it, and they do clash, they do have a differing of opinions, but again, like we said, by the end of it, they can't imagine working with anybody else, if you want to hear our opinions on Dempsey Makepeace, check out our pajama parties, because we've already discussed this to death in various episodes, and but again, another one is Ashes to Ashes. I mean, Gene Hunt he's very brash. Some of the comments it was 1980, that's why he got away with saying a lot of stuff he would never say now, but that was, Alex was the present day viewer, so she frowned upon these things, so that's why it worked. But again, he had a good heart underneath all that bravado. But yeah, it is a show that I am looking forward to seeing come back.
I think that what you're saying with Ashes to Ashes and Dempsey and Makepeace, both of them, is that the man doesn't respect the woman at first because she's a woman more than her poshness. But she gets results, and so he really starts to respect her and appreciate that she is as talented as he is in the policing department. But in other ones where they don't have that same sort of middle ground where they interact on, you know, and something to show, look, I'm good at that. They don't have that same ability to respect each other, you know. And Moonlighting, they do a kind of, I suppose, because Maddie is a good detective, and so he starts to realize that, and David is a good detective, and she starts to realize that. I think they need that something to show, look, I'm as good as you in whatever department it is.
I think what the difference between Dempsey Makepeace and Ashes to Ashes compared to Moonlighting is, regardless of their gender and their backgrounds, they were both equals in what they were doing. Whereas Maddie, she was the boss, he was the employee. They had the class divide, and Maddie was always going to try and get one over on David. It always felt like there was that divide between them. Whereas in the others, even though they had the divide, it didn't feel so big. It wasn't so gaping, as it were.
Yeah. And I've just thought of another example is Press Gang, which the 90s teen thing, it has the same kind of vibe, although it's not really a class thing. The class is, I'm British and you're American, which of course is another thing that the British, certain degree of British people tend to look down on Americans. And Linda is the editor of the newspaper, and Spike is sent to work as the newspaper as he is going to get kicked out of school otherwise. He's the bad boy, but not bad, but just disruptive and, you know, always doing something and not caring about what people think, that kind of thing. And of course, she thinks he's a terrible human being and stupid and all these things. But as they work on the newspaper, she realizes he's very clever and very astute, and, you know, and so that's what makes, and he realizes, although she is a terrible human being, she is a good editor and she has her own insecurities, and, you know, and I think that's they need that ground to interact and realize what is the inner core of the person and what good qualities they have, which obviously their class has blinded them to, you know, their class prejudice.
I think that's why it works so well, like, than in a film. In the film, you've got 2 hours to kind of get to know the character, feel an empathy for the character, and then by the end of it, it's all resolved. Then 2 hours, that's done. In a TV series, you can have an episode or two where you're establishing the characters, and you initially think, okay, this person's not a nice person, and it's as you go along in that series, you get more depth to them. You find out more. You find out, okay, yeah, it starts off, okay, she's not a very nice person, but then you think, oh, actually, that's why she's like the way she is. And it's the other character that brings them out of themselves. And even though they are so different at the beginning, the further their journey goes along together, they merge together best. They bring out the better qualities in each other. And they actually think, okay, we might have these different backgrounds, but we're not that different.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting thing. I was just thinking there about Just Good Friends. I don't remember feeling that they learn from each other, you know, that they seem to stay very much the same people they were in the beginning.
Yeah, I watched that again recently, and I actually found Penny a little bit irritating. I don't know. I mean, I like John Sullivan. I like his writing. I mean, Only Fools and Horses is always going to be a classic, and this was not. It was good. It wasn't as good, obviously, as good as Only Fools and Horses, but and they were fun. There were moments I properly laughed out loud. But as characters, I don't know if I actually really liked them that much.
It's interesting that, you know, if rewatching it now, I don't think I would particularly want them to stay together. I'd be thinking, wow, you're bad for each other, break up and leave. But in the 80s, it was massive. You know, the country was obsessed with it.
But I think the other issue is I did rewatch it recently. It was in lockdown, but I watched it all over the space of a week. When you're watching an episode now, it ends, and John Sullivan did the thing that you'd have the carried on playing in the background over the credits, and then you'd have the little scene at the end like a little cliffhangery bit, like where I don't think one episode she drove into the back of his car or whatever. So you'd come back and watch it the next week. Left it point where you think, oh, I've got to see what happens, and that's what draws you in. That's what I think even now, even with like Loki and WandaVision and what streaming services have it on a weekly thing, it makes it last so much longer. And I think Netflix should maybe do that with Lucifer, because I watched it last, it was in like a day, and then at the end of it, I was like, oh, I really wish I'd saved that. And back in the 80s, you watched it, you got invested because you didn't binge it in a day. You watched one episode and you think, oh my god, what's going to happen, and you came back the next week. And that's why Just Good Friends was so popular, because it spanned 3-4 years. Like Who's the Boss spanned 8 years. You didn't get to binge watch it all in one go, so you become invested over a much longer time, and you care more about these characters, because you don't, it's like in films, you go that journey, you watch it, it's done. So I don't know, I'm going off.
It's strange that, you know, our as a people, I don't mean our, I mean our attitudes have changed so much towards relationships, in that we know much more about psychology, and we understand much more about toxic behavior and what a healthy relationship is, and, you know, due to the rise of daytime TV and stuff like that. So I think that plays into it as well. You know, looking back at the 80s, a lot of times we'd be saying, oh, that's not a healthy relationship. Whereas in the 80s, you know, it was all about who's got the chemistry, who's, you know, lights up the screen, and you just want them to kiss and be together. And there wasn't the long-term thought of how would that work out, you know, and down a few years down the line, would they make each other happy? We didn't care about the ever after, just the happy bit.
Sometimes we don't even care about that now. We still watch it. We watch shows now. I mean, recently watching, I don't know, we watched Miranda, and it's like, oh, just kiss already. And it's like, but I guess that's a different scenario, because you know they belong together. I mean, again, go back to watching our podcast, and we've talked about that anyway. But because I think in the 80s, like even Sam and Diane, you go back, I mean, the first time they kiss, he's threatening to hit her. It's like, I really want to pop you one, you know, and it's like, you can't get away with that now. You shouldn't even have got away with it then. So attitudes and opinions, 80s relationships, as much as we want them to get together, some of them weren't, like you say, they weren't really healthy.
I think something we haven't mentioned about the whole concept of Lady and the Tramp is there is a huge swathe of misogyny in it, because it comes from this idea that women should be aloof and you know, turning you down your offer, because women shouldn't like sex, they shouldn't be seeking sex, they shouldn't be interested in the kind of fun that these men are having, not necessarily just sex, but you know what I mean, the kind of going to pubs and having a good time. And so it's like, you know, when the men are breaking through that barrier and getting through the ice queen thing, so that and realizing, oh, she is just a girl, like saucy, you know. And I think that's something that obviously we don't have as a culture anymore, certainly not very much.
For the men initially, the women, the higher end of women became a challenge for them. Became a challenge. It was like
TikTok. Somebody marked it, wasn't me.
So so these women, because they're out of their league, they're out of their normal dating pool, as it were, they become a challenge, and they become that much more involved in trying to woo them, trying to get them into bed, and in the process of doing that, they do often fall in love. But it's not always starting off from a genuine place.
Yeah, that's exactly what Michael Brandon says in the clip from TV Years 1985 that I put up on our channel, which I will put a link up to it here.
Basically advertising, not like
our own work. Michael Brandon says exactly that. He says Makepeace is unobtainable to Dempsey, which immediately says to him, I've got to have you, you know, I've got to win this, because it's a challenge and he must win it. And I think you're right, that's where the initial stepping point is for most of the men, especially for somebody like Sam in Cheers. It's an ego boost, you know. Can you win the high class woman?
Yeah, and I think that's why there's I mean, there might be shows like this out there now. There is so much content on all the bazillion streaming channels. There might be a class divide show out there at the moment. We don't watch everything, but our knowledge, there's nothing like that now that we're aware of. If we're wrong, tell us and we'll go away and watch it. But it does seem to be an 80s 90s thing where you had more of the class divide, and again it is where attitudes change, because women aren't the same as they were back then either.
I think 3 Up 2 Down, which you mentioned, is actually a really good example of it. In that show, it's tied up the entire way the 80s were, because Angela, she is called Angela, isn't she? I can't remember. And her daughter is the perfect 80s person, even though she wasn't born in the 80s. Obviously she's supposed to be in her 20s in the 80s. It has come from a rich family, has come from a very a lineage, and you know, to behave a certain way, but she's gone into modeling, so she's mixing with everybody, every kind of person. So she doesn't hold her mother's prejudices, she doesn't hold her mother's ideas of how she should live, and she's totally fine with you know, showing her body and living with a man without marrying him, having a child, you know, all those things are she's breaking through from everything that her mother held dear.
Yeah, but also if you think about it, the guy she ends up with is Michael Elphick's son.
Yes.
And again, so they're a lady and a tramp within themselves as a subplot to the main lady and the tramp between Angela and I've forgotten Michael Elphick's character's name. So again, but they're perfectly happy, they're content. But Angela, being that much older, is that much more appalled. She's kind of like the Penny character from Miranda in this situation. She can't be seen to be seen with these people, you know, she has a image to uphold, but then she ends up living in the basement flat with this guy who's into taxidermy and drinking and I don't know, maybe plays darts, I don't know, but it's like, you know, that kind of setup.
That's exactly the young couple are the epitome of the 80s version of, you know, where they don't care that they're from different classes. He's a photographer, she's a model, they get on well, they have the same, you know, views on life, so they don't see class at all, which is sort of, that was them being very futuristic, you know, they were seeing the future, whereas their parents were still in the past, and that it was a big issue that, you know, who your family was, where you grew up, what was your job.
Yeah. And here's a piece of trivia for you. My dad went to school with Michael Elphick.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
I did love this information. I loved Boone. It was a great series, and obviously I loved 3 Up 2 Down. And I think you're right in that in a sense it's just that she gets worn down in 3 Up 2 Down. She just eventually realizes, oh, there's no point fighting this anymore. And she is attracted to him. She's obviously attracted to him. And but I think one of the things is in 3 Up 2 Down is it is unusual compared to the other ones in that she is really not pleasant, which we've said possibly is a bit like Maddie or whatever. But Michael Elphick is his character, and again I can't remember his name either, is so nice. He's so kind and loving and forgiving and just wants her to be happy. You know, he's not horrible to her. And I think that's kind of lovely. And eventually she realizes that's, you know, that's what she has needed. It's not whether a guy knows how to go yachting. It's whether or not he's going to treat her like a princess, which he does.
Do you know what I've just Googled? I wasn't being rude, I was listening to you while we were saying that. I've just Googled 3 Up 2 Down. Yes. And here's an interesting link for you. Yes. Michael Elphick's name in 3 Up 2 Down was Sam Tyler.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. So yes.
It's a bit of a tie.
Those who don't know, Sam Tyler was the name of John Sim's character in Life on Mars, which then spun off Ashes to Ashes, which we've just talked about. They do change sometimes for the better because of that other person being in their lives.
Yes. I think that is the key part of it in terms of what you want from that relationship is you want them, and it's the same with all ships really, you want them to bring out the best in each other, and in some cases they do, some cases maybe not so much, but a lot of the time it's about meeting in the middle, about them becoming more the cool one, the controlled one becomes more loose and free and enjoys just having a good time and not caring what anybody thinks, and the guy who's just freewheeling and loving his life and doing whatever, he becomes more responsible and just to more put somebody else's needs. I think that's what a lot of the men are seen as sort of not egotistical but selfish, in that they just put their immediate desires first. I want to have a good time, who cares about the future,
I think another really good example of what you've just said that is key is, again, going back to the episode of Who's the Boss in Search of Tony. The whole premise of them having the conversation where he says, I want to go and earn the money, I have thoughts getting married, but I need to be independent of being your housekeeper. The whole reason they have that conversation is because Angela's been going away enjoying herself. She's gone off skinny dipping, she's gone off, I don't know, jumping out, being blown out of a cannon or whatever, and she says to Tony, I couldn't have done this 5 years ago, you bring this out in me. And she says to him how much she's changed because of him being in her life. And so that was quite a key episode where you see how much she's changed, but you also see how much he's changed, and that they are working at being together, but they're not quite there yet. And that's quite a key episode, because you don't often get that as a discussion with these characters on screen.
Yeah, that's a shame. TV shows should have characters discuss that more. A lot of times the getting together is just kiss, sleep together, get married, whatever. But I think it's really good to have these characters have these discussions and say, but how are we going to work together? How is this going to, how are we going to live day to day? How does this work long term? I think Who's the Boss in the Upper Hand is really the perfect example of this, in that you see they become friends first before anything else. They become friends, they're living together, they know they work as a family, and then they have the actual relationship between the two of them. So all the issues are worked out before they get together, it's perfect. It's exactly how it should be. But a lot of them, like Moonlighting or Cheers, they don't discuss the issues at all. It's just fighting and sex and nothing in between.
It's like, I'm trying to think, did they do it in Moonlighting? But all I can think of is the conversation in the laundromat, and then she disappears for 8 months. So it's like,
so not very much. and I mean, as we said, as I mentioned it about Lovejoy, they have that discussion and just flat out say it doesn't matter how well we get on and how much we're attracted to each other. And that's not the words they use, but I mean, that's the essence of it. Is that our lives are too different. We can't do anything about it. And I think it's a shame that other shows didn't go down that route. And I suppose, for instance, in Cheers, they eventually reached that realization that Diane, no matter how many times, how much she loves Sam and is attracted to him, this isn't the life she wants to lead. She has this idea of living an artist's life and has to go off and pursue it.
I think it's like in Parks and Recreation when they get married and Leslie and Ben say to each other, I love you, but I like you.
Yeah.
That is so fundamental. And again, like you get Sam and Diane, you get Maddie and David, and you often think, they love each other, but they don't like each other very much.
I realise we haven't discussed what we're going to talk about in terms of a shipwreck.
I think, as we've already mentioned it already, and as we've just done it as the pajama party, we should discuss Miranda.
Hurrah! Okay.
Fabulous. We love Miranda at the shipyard. She's our hero.
Yes. So this month's shipwreck is BBC One sitcom Miranda, which started as a radio series, which quite a lot of BBC sitcoms.
It was called Miranda Hart's Joke Shop in 2008, I think it was.
And a lot of it seems to be the way a lot of BBC stuff starts as a radio play initially. And it tells the story of Miranda, who is from a posh family, and but she's tall and awkward and likes to have fun and doesn't want to grow up and doesn't want to take life seriously. So much so she spends all her money on a joke shop. She runs a joke shop with her best friend Stevie, And the love interest is Gary, her old friend from university, and he runs a bar / cafe place.
Yeah, he starts off employed as a chef in the restaurant next door to their shop. And in the first episode, he has obviously been away. They've not seen each other for years, and he's been hired as the chef. So that's where it starts. They renew their relationship from that point. And then I think by the third, he goes traveling at the end of season 1 and comes back at the beginning of season 2. And then by season 3, he actually owns the restaurant.
Yeah. And it's 3 seasons and 2 specials. 2 specials? Is that correct?
Yes.
Long? Yes.
Yeah.
So it's
about 20 episodes altogether.
Yeah, as we say, it's a typical British BBC. It's short. So what we're saying is you can watch it pretty much in 2 days, probably, the entire thing.
Yeah, I started watching one the other night and think was work the next day, and before I knew it, it was nearly 1 o'clock in the morning, and I think I really should go to sleep now. I was just watching an episode of Miranda, like 6 hours later, or 6 episodes later, even.
It is very, very funny. That is above the shit. It is just so funny. Miranda breaks the fourth wall all the time. Yes, she did it before Fleabag.
Yes, I'm Mirandaing.
Yes, I'm Mirandaing. And it is a really good Tom Ellis, we should say. Tom Ellis, Lucifer, plays Gary.
All the shows I got tickets for, that was one I desperately wanted to go and see and never got tickets for. So that was. But
it is a live audience type of show, isn't it? It's sort of she paid a lot of dues to the 70s sitcoms of British sitcoms.
Yeah, I mean, even at the end of it, where you have been watching, like they used to do on like Hello, like it's the guys that used to do like
Croft
Dad's Army and Hello and all of those Heidi High tributes.
Croft and Perry.
I was going to say David Lloyd, but that's a Jim, so that's not right.
David Croft and somebody Perry. I can't remember who the other what his name is.
Yes, yeah. But David Croft and yes, what she said. But yeah, I think what we love about Miranda as well, though, is she is such a relatable character, especially for women, and because women are flawed, and we should embrace that. And even the stuff that she posts on Instagram, and especially over the last year, it's so supportive and so lovely that I think that's what makes her so endearing as a character and as a comedian and as an actress. She just seems like a really lovely person. Yes. But also I think, again, we discuss it in the pajama party episodes, the fact that, men don't see what we see. It's the one that we discussed called Let's Do It, where there's 3 men all want to sleep with Miranda, and then we got Gary as well, who's just lovely. And again, like Gary's just as flawed as Miranda is, which I think is also a unique perspective, that because all of those characters are very well defined. They're not just for the sake of it. They are fleshed out. But
yeah.
I think all the episodes of Miranda are on iPlayer. We're not, so you can actually go and watch them. I think they were on Netflix as well, but and I think they're on BritBox. So they are easy to track down, and we strongly recommend watching it. That is definitely one of our favourite ships. And there's lots of tropes in it, but they're just we say tropes like they're a bad thing, but when they're executed well, it works really well. And you can't have will they won't they's without a trope. You have to have that for it to progress, and you can't. If you didn't drag out, they get together at the end of it, you may as well make it a film. So it's like
we love the tropes. That's why they are what make it. The almost kiss, the interrupted kiss, the fight. I love wife. And Miranda does a lot of them very knowingly. She knows their tropes and knows she's doing them for that.
Yeah, completely. That's why it works as well, because they're not just done for the sake of it. The episode Let's Do It, and I think if you go back and listen, there's a bit where you say, Gary goes in and I guess I'm just becoming more desperate to kiss you, and you're just like, I just made my insides go funny, and it does give you that. That's what we want from a ship. We want those moments where, you want to be screaming at the telly, or like when you have a to be continued, throw something at it because it's annoyed you because you wanted something to happen then. And obviously the jokes with the telephones and there's somebody at the door or a bee or whatever, it's went over a B. Look at X-Files movie where that got them, but it's like
Yeah. In case you're wondering, why are we talking about a B? Yeah,
actually no, there was a bee in the episode of Miranda because she says, "Oh, there's a bee in my hair," and
that's right. So yeah, and then she suffered geese interruptus, which is different.
Yeah, kisses
Yeah.
interruptus happens a lot.
So that's Miranda, BBC on BBC iPlayer. Check it out. We highly recommend it. And you can watch our Pajama Party podcasts where we talk our way through Miranda and often don't pay attention to what's happening on screen. We really apologise when that happens.
I'm not sure how we're doing it because there's 2 episodes that are going to drop on the 2nd of August. This episode won't be out by then, so they'll already be online to view. Yeah. And the 2 episodes where we review 3 Little Words and A Brief Encounter, which is the last 2 episodes of season 3. If they're not up already, they'll be up there soon. So I'm not quite sure if this comes out before that or not. So.
It depends when you're watching this.
If they're not, they'll be there very soon.
Exactly. We'll at least link you to the first one, and then you can, and that one will hopefully link to the others as they are added.
And then also be links through the website as well, which will go up soon.
And our social media. And
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
I was going to say, speaking of,
come and find us and like us. Please like us. We are likable people, so you should come and like us.
Come and follow us for our Twitter and Instagram and Facebook posts of we post a lot of what happened on this day, and we ask a lot of questions, and we would love to hear some answers.
And we post pictures of our favourite ships, and we talk about current stuff. I think we recently posted a question about Loki and Sylvie, and we talk about in 10 Day recently we talked about Bones, and if you've got any ideas of stuff we should watch, then we'll happily take that on board as well. So
yes, absolutely.
On board ship. We want an on board ship.
So next month, I will let Lucy tell you next month being September, what we'll be talking about in September.
Yes, so as most people are aware, in America in September, although I think it's slightly early this year with Brooklyn Nine-Nine is starting in August, where we have the season premieres of all the American shows, generally starts around this time of year. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the season finales of returning shows. So we're going to look at the last episodes from Chicago Fire, The Rookie. I think we're going to look at Sex Education, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and something else I've forgotten, Grey's Anatomy and The Walking Dead. So we're going to be looking at the season finales of those that have already aired, so there won't be any spoilers. When we review them, we won't have seen what's going to happen, what would have happened in what's coming up. So we're going to talk about the key points of those episodes, talk about where we think it might go, what we would like to see, and go from there. And then maybe what we might do is discuss or write an article about what did happen and put that on the website afterwards, but we haven't got that far. But so check out our pajama parties, they'll be going up. We're going to try and do one a week, so check out our website on a Monday evening. Yes. And they'll be to see
and our
listen to, because it's a podcast.
Yeah, we'll not see. Our main podcast in September will be on the topic of cliffhangers. It's, obviously every show has them, whether they've got a ship or not, but we'll be talking about some of the best and worst, and by worst we mean the show got cancelled. Cliffhangers in shipping that have gone before, why they do them, well, we all know why they do them, but the elements of them and what we think of them and what some of the good examples are. So that's
this is what we were talking about earlier, when you have the no moment when you see the to be continued and it's just like really?
Or just the screen just goes black and you go no, because you
see someone's name come up, you start to test that person's name because the episode's ended and it's just like really. So until
then, please subscribe and follow our social media, which is all down. Everything is in the information in the box below this video, in our description box. And thank you for staying with us.
And if you Google the shipyard UST, we generally come up quite high up now, which is quite good. We're quite easy to find on Google. So just type the shipyard, because I've just found out that that's actually the name of a storage facility in Littlehampton down the road. So So type
Bit different.
shipyard UST, and then you might find us. But
Yeah.
again, the links below.
There'll be lots of things to see from us, all our various ways we have of spreading the joy of shipping and the
We love the
pain
love.
of shipping. Yeah, it's all
We
the
love the
love.
loving.
And can we just point out our awesome signs that we both have, which came from our friend
yes.
Fee, which we really love them. Thank you so much, Fee. They're very good.
You are also
Very well demonstrated. Beautiful. Yes, and so we will see you hopefully in September, and we will enjoy all the returning shows and what new ships and canon possibly they might bring. Okay, thank you.
Like you said,
carry on. I'll just stop there and then I'll go. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that if you've got any ideas, just tweet us, message us on Facebook, go to the website, and we'll listen to, give us ideas. We want to hear ideas. So
yeah, as you say, we can't watch every single show, so we may be missing some epic shipping that we don't know is out there, and we want to know about it too, for our own selfish reasons, apart from anything else.
Also, this is what we want. So anybody out there that watches Law and Order, can you please just tell us about the Benson ship? Is it Benson?
Yeah, Benson and Stabler.
Yeah. We've not seen it, and we don't have time to go back and watch 22 seasons of 22 episodes. Yeah. So if you can just put it in a nutshell, and then, or just tell us which episodes we should watch, we'll go away and watch them, because we think this is quite a key, significant ship that might be touched upon again in the coming 21, 22 TV seasons. Yeah. So we want to know a bit more about that.
We do desperately want to ship this ship. In fact, it's what I call a Twitter ship, where you see it on Twitter and you go, oh, I ship it already, and I've only seen photos. And
I think it's like with Winona Abbey as well. I mean, we talked about that last month. Again, you see stuff on Twitter and you think, oh, I should watch this from the beginning. But sometimes you think that's so far along. It's like Supernatural. Yeah, it's another one. Everyone's like, oh, you really should go and watch that. It's like, it took me longer to get through Grey's Anatomy. I don't think I can commit myself to that bigger ship or season anymore. But like we said before, if you give us 3 or 4 key episodes of featuring the big ship, we'll go away and watch them.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, I think that's us, and we shall see you in September for the new seasons. And thank you for joining us, if you did.
Happy summer.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye.